Hello, and welcome to the Light of Navigation. This is where God's love, His hope, and His goodness is found in any storm. My name is Marguerite, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. Please don't forget to share this video if it will bless someone you know. I also appreciate it when you click the like and subscribe buttons as well. I have a question. Do you ever wish God would turn back the clock or hands of time? This is a true story of the literal redemption of time in my life. A reversal, a buyback, if you will, with a healing miracle that I received when it was needed the most. Along those lines of thought, there's the biblical term called redemption. And by definition, to redeem something means, in a general sense, to buy something back or to bring about deliverance as a result of a transaction. And then there's the redeeming of time, or buying up an opportunity where time is a season. Redemption is also about being rescued, a reversal or deliverance out of a bad circumstance, or being delivered out of a situation, and sometimes just in the nick of time. You know, I think of all the movies that have been made about going back in time, reversing it, or also going forward in time too. Man has dreamed of manipulating time for centuries. There was a king in the Old Testament who experienced a reversal of time on his behalf. He was dying, and he cried out to God for more time. As a sign from God of promised healing for this king, it was decided that the sun's shadow would, in one day, reverse its direction on a set of palace steps outside. Back in those days, a set of palace stairs outside were used as a time clock. The sun's shadow would move up the steps at different locations during the day, and it was telling what time it was. This king's sign of healing would involve the sun's shadow going backwards down the staircase instead of forward, a reversal of time. Some years ago, when a close friend and I had been learning together how to be more focused when praying for others, we were studying and learning a unique prayer ministry called Theophostic. By definition, the word Theophostic means God's light in the Greek. I've needed healing and change in my life on a personal level, and part of my journey has been learning about ministries that teach it just like this one. Part of the training in this ministry is learning to allow Christ to step into your history, your memories where trauma resides, or your current moments during time of prayer. There's a connecting with Him, and He brings healing into needed areas emotionally and spiritually, and even physically at times. I sat down with my friend on a particular night in my home to walk through some prayer on a personal level. I had been significantly ill for several days at that time. I almost canceled our meeting that night to pray together because I was so sick. That week was tough. Suddenly, with only in a few days' time, I had gained a significant amount of weight, a total of 3 pant sizes. I had been forced to purchase new slacks for work because of it that week. My lungs became congested and filled with fluid. Breathing had become very difficult as well. Mentally, while at work, I felt like I was walking through a fog. When I left work one evening that week, I came close to blacking out as I walked out the front door to go home, and it really frightened me. The possibility that I was suffering from a severe case of pneumonia entered my mind, But I had decided to see a physician at a later date when I felt I could get away from my work. When my friend and I sat down together at my kitchen counter that night, we prayed for God to speak to us, for His leading and healing where it was needed in my life. An image came clearly to my mind from the Holy Spirit rather quickly, and I knew God was beginning to move. In the image, I saw myself running up the side of a mountain, a large mountain, with the goal of laying my heart on a stone altar that was dedicated to God at its summit. I ran to the top of the mountain at what looked like a supernatural speed, and there was a sense of urgency that I also felt at the same time. The understanding came to me that I had been holding back a part of my heart from the Lord. I had held it back because my heart, it had been crushed as a child through abuse and rejection. I had learned not to share my heart with others for the fear of being rejected again. In those moments, as I sat there, I knew that I needed to give all of my heart on that mountain's altar to the living God. Not holding anything back, I gently laid my heart down there. I was perplexed, though, by the supernatural speed and urgency that I saw and felt. The urgency I felt in that image as I raced to the top of that mountain. It seemed like it was a race against time. What happened next was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before, and I can only be described as a massive lifting sensation of a huge, heavy weight that had been on top of me that I had been absolutely oblivious to. There was a flow of some sort of force that was coming off of my shoulders and lifting upwards through the top of my head and up through the ceiling and the roof of my home up above me. It felt like a mighty, massive river current. The lifting sensation lasted for several minutes. My friend, who was sitting at the kitchen counter with me at that time, suddenly sat backward abruptly in her chair, and there was a look of shock and amazement on her face. And she said, "I'm seeing a vision of a clock. The clock is large, and its hands are spinning backwards, not forwards. They're spinning backwards faster and faster and faster." A minute or two later, after she had voiced what she was seeing, she began gripping her left arm in evident pain, and she said, my left arm is hurting me horribly. It's as though I'm having a heart attack, but I know I'm not having one." Neither of us were sure about what was happening in those moments. There was no doubt God had been moving incredibly. But what did it all mean? Why was He giving a vision of a clock with the hands spinning backwards in time? Why was my friend physically feeling the symptoms of a heart attack that she wasn't having? And what was the massive lifting sensation that I was experiencing? The movement and direction of God's Spirit gently ceased slowly over a few minutes of time. We both sat there perplexed by the night's events, and we eventually both decided to call it a night, and she went home. I was so exhausted from the physical illness I'd been battling that week, so I decided to retire for the night as well. The following morning, as I stood in my kitchen with my cup of coffee in hand, I began to slowly realize that something was vastly different. The thought came to my mind that my heart felt like the heart of a 17-year-old. Here I am in my mid-40s at the time, and my heart, it felt light and young and strong again. In the moments following, I realized that there was no fluid buildup in my body anymore. In fact, it was gone. It had disappeared literally overnight. My lungs were no longer drowning in liquid. They were clear, as though I had never been sick at all. As I stood there, it hit me like a freight train. I had gone to bed the night before feeling very ill and wondering if I should go to an emergency room, and I wake up the next morning completely healed. It was then that a gentle, quiet voice spoke to me as I stood there. It was God's, and he said, "Marguerite, look up the symptoms of heart failure." Still dressed in my pajamas, I immediately began to research the symptoms of heart failure on my laptop computer. I visually scanned the medical symptoms that were listed: congested lungs and shortness of breath. Yes. Rapid fluid buildup and water retention in the abdomen and ankles. Yes. Swelling with sudden weight gain. Yes. Dizziness, weakness, and fatigue. Very much so. Rapid or irregular heartbeats. Yes. It was then that I realized that God had healed me of heart failure that was in its final stages. For many years, I've had a heart condition that has plagued me physically. It was brought under control with a prescription medication called Lanoxin. As a byproduct of the foxglove plant, it's actually a poison used in low dosage amounts to control rapid heart rate conditions. I'm firmly convinced that the Lanoxin was also slowly killing my heart physically from its long-term use. As I stood in awe of my healing in those moments, and as I took in what had happened to me, the understanding came about the vision of the clock with its hands spinning backwards faster and faster. It represented the reversal or redemption of time from the premature aging of my heart. That premature aging had brought me into heart failure. The heart failure itself had been reversed as well. The Lord had redeemed the time from my heart physically, and the aging had been reversed by several years. The clock had been turned back. That was why my heart felt so young, so vibrant, and not weighted down as it had been for so many years. And not only that, an impending heart attack had been taken away. The symptoms of a heart attack that my friend physically felt, that was not hers, foreshadowed an imminent heart attack that I was going to have had that night. God had stopped it before it had come to pass, and the pain that she felt was a sign. It's no wonder why that race was so swift to the top of that mountain to place my heart on God's altar. Time had been of the essence. I firmly believe I would have died in my sleep that night had God not intervened. And it began to slowly dawn on me that what I had experienced and my friend had witnessed was a life-saving, bona fide miracle, and we did not understand it when it had been happening. That morning when I spoke with my friend, she was as much in shock as I was as we both began to realize the magnitude of God's great grace. He saved my life when I didn't even realize it was in such grave danger. After getting dressed that morning, I ran outside. I ran all over the place. I was running the full length of my half-acre piece of property, up 2 flights of stairs and back down. And you know, for the first time in many years, I was not out of breath when I ran. My heart felt like that of a 17-year-old. As I was still trying to grasp the magnitude of the miracle that I'd been given, I said to God, "Lord, you reversed the aging of my heart. You healed me of heart failure and took away an impending heart attack." And then I asked him this: where in the Bible does it talk about you reversing time for someone like this? I've always been taught to line things up with the Word of God, with the Scriptures. I heard God's whispered reply, and He said, "It was also King Hezekiah's story."